listening to Air International, flight number 103.1 FM, where you're sure to fly first class every time. And today we're fortunate to have with us Toni Etheridge. She's a program associate from the American Friends Service Committee, and she's leading the project Peace and Economic Justice. It's a leadership program for youth where she is educating the youth on the legislative process. Toni, thank you for coming, and can you share with us a little bit about what you're doing with that program?
Yes. Hi, April. Thank you. I do want to have an opportunity to also expand on that. In addition to our youth having engagement with the legislative process, there are several other aspects of the program as well. There are opportunities for young folks to learn about their community and those that live in their community with them. Particularly, we introduced through the Peace and Economic Justice Program in collaboration with Immigrant Rights Program, a program called ALBA, which is an acronym for African American Latino Bridge Building Project. And in that particular effort, both groups, African Americans and Latinos, work together to identify their similarities, their social struggles, as well as their social success. And then, of course, introducing to them ways through the legislative process and local policy, how they can get change or how they can make positive change.
And you were sharing with me that you had an opportunity to take the youth to Washington, D.C.
Okay, well, that particular program was through a program through American Friends Service Committee where youth from right here in Greensboro participated in a youth film festival, and it was called If I Had $1 Trillion, looking at the discretionary budget, which exceeds well over $1 trillion today, and challenging young people to look at that budget and knowing that there are less human needs divisions where money goes into, but more money actually goes into military and weaponry, and saying to the young folks, if you had $1 trillion, how would you spend that money? Well, we had a group right here in Greensboro that attend the Elimu Learning Center program. It's primarily youth from many different countries within Africa, and they reside here in Greensboro. Many of them, of course, immigrants and a few refugees. And once here, learning about how our democratic process moves, they had an opportunity to look at ways that they could actually create a video and amplify their voice on issues of, for example, economic development. One of the participants at Elimu Learning Center talked about economic development and highlighted the fact that if it wasn't for programs such as like Elimu and collaborations with American Friends Service Committee, that their opportunity to have an after-school resource center enhancing their academic learning would be a very small window. They wouldn't have the resources to take opportunities such as going to Washington, D.C., sitting across from their congresswoman and talking about issues right here in Greensboro that they'd like to see change, that they'd like to see more creative after-school locations that others like themselves can move ahead and create dreams. But this particular one was dealing with, we ran a week-long spring summer camp right here in Greensboro, and the focus was looking at human rights and how many times human rights, and particularly for immigrants or refugees that have resided here in Greensboro, they've come here because living in their country, their human rights have been ignored, demoralized, or even yet probably just diminished. And this past spring, we did a human rights digital storytelling project, and there were several youths that uplifted stories that looked at issues that concerned what the nation was actually also hearing. One of those stories looked at racial discrimination, particularly within the police departments, and how many times, as we've seen play out over and over again through the media, many African Americans targeted and being killed. And we had one or two youths that actually uplifted those concerns. Right here in the USA, you would think that as it's depicted across in magazines, on television, that the U.S. is the place to be. But we still struggle with racism. That's very, very apparent, unfortunately, through our legal system and through the challenges that young people, particularly young black males, are dealing with when they encounter police officers. And so one of those issues was lifted up by one of the participants, really focusing on how police accountability lacks sorely in the U.S.
Toni, through your leadership program, the Peace and Economic Justice Program. Can you tell me any stories of how your youth have used the skills that you have given them to educate on the legislative process?
Yes. Thank you, April. So a lot of the youth had an opportunity when they participate in our program. There was an opportunity for youth to actually tell their stories, talk about personal struggles. One of those opportunities came about through a grant that our office received, and that grant had a focus for particular groups. Those groups were immigrants, refugees, and Black young people. And it was through specific tools that were either enhanced young people telling their stories or for the very first time learning how to utilize storytelling tools. Through digital storytelling, young were able to utilize audio recording, video editing, and storyboarding. The use of these digital storytelling tools help amplify issues that within their own personal life or within their family shine light to these encounters and how they can actually change them by lifting up their voice, creating a video, highlighting these circumstances, and presenting them to policymakers as a conversation piece to talk about change.
Toni, can you tell me what positive things you have identified within the participants of your program after giving them these tools?
Sure. One of the positive changes I've seen, and you may think that this is not as a huge change, but it's actually really big if you think about it. Many times, a lot of the young people that we work with in program activities and program projects, it's their very first time thinking about activism, thinking about social change, thinking about social justice in a way that speaks to them. Many times they have said to me that they thought activism was, always marching, always protesting, always demonstrating, that you had to have your physical body out there marching. And yes, there is a portion of that, but these young people have actually also been able to embrace writing to our legislative policymakers, standing before them at City Council, sitting across from them in Washington, D.C., talking to a congresswoman. What's empowering? What are some of the big outcomes? It's seeing these young people actually develop into leaders and leadership that was already there, but because of being able to use tools such as digital storytelling and giving them the autonomy to actually use another medium other than their physical presence of their body, but using another medium to make their message powerful. Some might say it's priceless. It's beyond that, because you can have a young person who's not necessarily comfortable with speaking in front of people for the first time, and being able to talk to a local representative and talk about issues that really affect their community, affect them directly, and be able to direct that with statistics, with real life experience, and to see them standing there having this conversation, engaging. I think for me, that's a monumental outcome.
Toni, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. And I look forward to talking to you again in the very near future. You've been listening to Toni Etheridge, and she is from the American Friends Service Committee of the Carolinas, and she leads the Peace and Economic Justice Program. Once again, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, April.